Hey everybody, my name is Ryan Mitten, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how you can plane and joint rough lumber for your upcoming project. To ensure that we have one side with a perfectly flat face, I'm going to be showing you two different techniques that you can use when the boards are wider than your jointer. Most jointers have a capability of 6 or 8 inches unless you get up into the more expensive ones. And this technique will allow you to be able to get that perfectly flat face that you want on one side. Then once we have that flat face, I'm going to show you how you can get your second flat side perpendicular to your first. So you want to make sure that this side is going to be perpendicular to the short side of your board. And I'm going to show you how you can do that with your jointer. And for those of you who don't have a jointer, I'll show you a way that you can achieve the same results using a table saw and a jointer sled. I'd like to take a second to thank everybody for watching this video. If you like what you see, just don't forget to subscribe and like the video down below. And with that, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So as I was saying earlier, there's two different types of ways to plane a board and get that nice flat face on the top. The first method is doing what I call a skip plane, and in doing this you need to have a fairly flat board to start with. You're not going to be able to use this technique on a board that has a lot of warp or twist or bow in it. This is strictly going to be a method that you can use if you picked out a good piece of lumber from the lumber mill yourself. And in order to see if you have a good piece, you can push down on the corners of the board and you can see whether or not it moves. And as you can see, when I push down on this, there is very little movement. So I know that skip planing is going to work on a board like this. However, if you go to a board like this one I've picked out, see how when I push on it, both sides move quite a bit. This piece of wood is going to be very tough to skip plane, and you would need to use the second technique, which is going to be using a planer sled, and I'll get to that in just a minute. First, let's go ahead and run this flat piece through the planer using the skip plane method and see how the results turn out. As you can see here, skip planing on this board worked. It is perfectly flat. Got my measurement here. Let's see how accurate we got. I have 1.588 inches here, 1.592, so that's 4 thousandths apart. I'm definitely good with that number. Now let's go look at how to handle a board that has warp. So here I have an example of what the planer sled looks like. This planer sled is 8 feet long. It's much longer than needed for a board like this, but since I do up to 8-foot tabletops, I like to have the ability to do a long piece, so I keep it that long. So for this instance, I'm going to be just using this little back portion of my planer sled. The important things to note here is this back rail that helps push the board against this to keep it from sliding out. As the blades are spinning, they're rotating and pushing the board backwards. So that's going to allow the board to stay in place as it's rotating around. And then all of these wedges that I've put under here are going to be holding the board in its place from pushing down. So the planer wants to push down on the board as well. So when it's going through there, this will keep the board situated in the exact same place that I put it, so that when it goes through, we'll slowly be lowering these high spots, which are going to be on this end and this end, because when we push down on it, this end and this end were the low points. So that means these are going to be our high points when we put this up onto our planer sled. And then once we've gone through several passes like this, we're going to see that we're going to slowly achieve a flat face on this top side. We don't flip it. We don't do anything other than bring it back around and put it back through. And then once we have achieved a complete cut across here, where the planer takes an even cut all the way across, we know that this side is flat. We can then flip it over without using the planer sled and then plane that side down. And as I've said before, when we do this, we're going to take a large amount of material off of this board to get it flat. That is the risk you run when you have these twisted or warped boards. You're going to have far less thickness than you started with to achieve a truly flat board. So sometimes it's not worth it, and in this case, this board would not be worth it. I'm only using this as an example to show you. So let's go ahead and run this through the planer and see what we can achieve for a flat side on this top. So now we've run this through the planer on that top face, and now we have a nice smooth top here. You can see on the bottom we're still wobbly because that was the side that is pushed against the planer sled, and we had that shimmed up. Top is flat, so now we can see that we have lots of wobble like we had before, and when we flip it over, nothing. It's completely flat. So now we're going to take this, run it through the planer until we get a nice even cut all the way across again, and then we're going to have a flat board. And there we have it. You can see here, perfectly flat, level. When I push on it, it's not going anywhere. We've planed both sides so that they're both perfectly flat and level. And you can see that this board that used to be 3/4 of an inch thick is now roughly a 1/2 inch thick. So we had to take 1/4 of an inch off of this board to achieve this flat look. So you're going to sacrifice your thickness, as I said before, to get that perfectly flat board. So that is why it's very important when you're picking out your lumber to try and make sure that it is flat and doesn't have bows or twists or warps in it that are going to cause you to have to mill more of the board away than you would want to for your project. So let's go on to the next step, which is going to be jointing. Now that I've showed you how to get a board perfectly flat using the planer and achieve the perpendicular flat side using the jointer, now I'm going to show you how you can achieve that flat side without using a jointer. And for that, I'm going to use my jointer sled. So I made this 8 feet long, and it has clamps in 3 locations along it to clamp down onto the board. For demonstration, I'm going to use this board. It has a rough edge on it. It has not been jointed at all yet. And what we can do is we can put it on here, and it doesn't matter how you put this onto this sled, because the important part is that this face all along the right side is perfectly square. I've made sure that the bottom to the side is perpendicular, just as you would achieve if you had jointed this board on the bench jointer. So clamping this board down, so when I clamp this down onto the jointer sled, I'm going to transfer this perfectly perpendicular face to this side of the board on the table saw. Then all we need to do is flip it over, put our good side right back onto the fence, and then we'll make our next cut to make the other side of the board parallel to the side that we just made using the jointer sled. That concludes this video on how to plane and joint rough lumber. In this video, I've given you some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way on how to deal with things like not having a large enough jointer to handle wide lumber, how to joint wood without even having a jointer. So if you like this kind of video, make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, and as you can see, I've just finished using those tips and tricks to put together a tabletop, and I have that glued up here right next to me. And make sure you look for a video coming out on that table build project that I'm working on.